poked a tiny pumpkin into an empty jug. The pumpkin grew until it completely filled the jug and could grow no more. When the farmer broke the glass, he had a pumpkin exactly the size and shape of the jug. If we're not careful, each of us can do a similar thing. We can mistakenly poke ourselves into jugs that limit our growth. But it is we who do the poking, not the job, not the company, nor the territory, nor the economy, nor the times. We do it. We do it. We do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. We do it. We do it. We do it to ourselves.
I'm not even sure I entirely agree with the sentiment of that song, even though I picked it out. But we do a lot of things to ourselves. There's no question about that. And certainly I'm interested in any kind of analogy or metaphor that involves a pumpkin being poked into a misshaping environment. And I often do feel like, very specifically, like a pumpkin that has been poked into a misshaping environment. Maybe I even feel that way right now. Anyway, let me tell you the plan, to the extent that there is one. It's Ask or Tell Me Anything, which means that you can call up. You can call 888-720-9677. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. 888-720-9677, better known as 888-720-WNPR. And then at a certain point, if everything works out, Senator Chris Murphy will walk in here and he will sit down and either he and I will talk for half an hour or he'll take calls. I haven't really work that part out. I'm going to ask him what he wants to do. But anyway, that's the plan. And we would you feel free. It doesn't have to be about the state of the world. It doesn't have to be hot takes on the news. It can be just about anything you want it to be about. But there's quite a bit going on in the world that might be worth talking about. Today I posted something up on Facebook saying that Chris Murphy was going to be coming in here, and a supporter of President Trump said that I should ask him whether he thinks that if Donald Trump brings peace to Putin's attack, his war against Ukraine, whether Chris Murphy thinks that Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. And I responded that I thought that was kind of unfair to President Trump because he has done every bit as much to end cancer as he has done to end Putin's war against Ukraine. So it's not fair not to consider him for the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine, too. If that's the bar, if that's the bar he has to clear, then it's pretty much the same in every possible area of human enterprise and intellectual thought. So here we go. We are going to start taking some calls here. And let's see, I don't even know what this is about, but it's from Anthony from New Haven. And he's kind of a brand, so you just sort of trust the brand. Hi, Anthony, you've got the floor.
Hey, Colin, how are you?
I am just fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm calling because I want to promote a comedy show that I'm doing on Saturday that Sean Murray will be performing in next month. Not this month, but next month. I think I've called in before and talked a little bit about how there's not really a big comedy scene in New Haven, and I'm trying to change that by bringing comedians in from New York for a show on Saturday at 7 at the Lab, 522 State Street in New Haven. And so, I want to continue the conversation about sort of the lack of comedy in New Haven, how the Connecticut comedy scene is based in Hartford. And really, I'm hoping that people will come and support New Haven comedy.
Yeah, but it's kind of nice. I mean, Hartford, we have a little bit of a New Haven inferiority complex, so it's kind of nice if we can outpace New Haven in something other than insurance and, munitions. So give us that little crumb, Anthony. Why do you have to take it away from us? But I get it. And I think we've said this before, but I mean, there's an obvious value to comedy. People laugh, it releases endorphins, they feel better. It's just, the whole thing is just good. I think there's also a secondary benefit, which is particularly at a time of demoralization, which I think is a pretty good description for the time that we're in right now. There's some cohesion that goes on probably, and maybe just a way to recharge ourselves a little bit. I mean, one of the things we can't do is protest all the time and worry all the time. So I salute what you're doing.
I appreciate it. And I should mention also that I'm hosting, Colin. I am hosting the show. So I hope that the listeners will come and support.
Yeah.
And I hope next month that they will come, especially for Sean Murray.
Oh, yes. So we should say Sean Murray, who guest hosted The Nose on Friday, I thought did an estimable job at it. We're very excited about that. I'm very excited to hear. Okay, I might not do that well in this, but Eric is calling me from someplace called Cheshire with a sports trivia question. Is that correct?
Yes, a sports trivia challenge question.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the question. In what sport does the term swan neck apply, and under what context?
Swan neck. So I have to come up with a context too. It feels like it should be, Olympic diving or something, but that's probably not right.
Okay, I'll give you what the answer to that is. A neighbor and I were watching a college men's basketball game in the community room.
So is it like is it a free throw thing? Is it like the ideal motion for a free throw?
Actually, what happened is that one of the players scored a three-pointer, a distance shot, and one of the sports announcers said he's got that nice swan neck. Mm-hmm. And my neighbor and I looked at each other because we've never heard that term being used before, and I think we both think that it has to do with the follow-through.
Yeah, the follow-through, yeah.
For a shot, which imparts a backspin on the ball so that if the ball hits the rim, it kind of hangs on to the rim for a longer period of time, maximizing the chance that it will fall through the hoop.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever seen swan basketball. It's usually done in kind of shady basement environments and urban centers and stuff like that. It's a little bit like cockfighting, but, the Swans clearly don't like doing this. They don't enjoy it at all. It's not their purpose.
So we think it has to do with the final position of the shooting arm with the fingers pointing down toward the floor.
I would like to lodge a protest right now, which is to say that you set this up as you were asking me a sports trivia question, but it turns out to be about a term you've only ever heard once.
Yeah.
and that you really were, your real plan was to explain or offer a probable explanation of this term.
But my neighbor has actually watched college basketball fervently for over 50 years. And that is the first time he ever heard that term being used. And I've asked a number of people, including those who have played basketball, either in college or high school, and they had never heard that term being used. So it's kind of an interesting term. And when I watch basketball, which isn't often, I often try and predict, while the ball's in midair, I try and predict whether the ball's going to fall through or not. Because usually it's not only the backspin, but when the ball travels toward the basket in a high arc, it's the angle of approach of the ball to the basket that actually maximizes its chance of going in.
Well, this brings to mind, I'm going to say, by the way, thank you very much, Eric. This brings to mind an experience that I will just quickly recall. So up in the northwest corner of Connecticut, in Lakeville, Connecticut specifically, there was a game that was invented by a novelist and short story writer named Ron Carlson. It was called Utah Soccer. And, when someone makes up a game, people invent games all the time. And the real test of a game is, does anybody play it when the game inventor has moved on to other things? In other words, is it necessary to have the game inventor present at all times? And so Utah Soccer was a good enough game that, so after Ron Carlson ceased to be teaching up there and went back to Utah or someplace, Utah Soccer continued to be played. And once in a while, I would be up there and I would play it. But one day, Ron Carlson came back, and it was during the summer, and a game of Utah Soccer was organized. And playing the game with the inventor of the game is a whole different experience because it's sort of like the Pope, like the Pope can just sort of say, you know what, today I've just decided there's going to be a new rule. and it's going to be, I don't know. I didn't think this through enough to kind of come up with a really good rule for the Pope to invent. But you know what I'm saying. He doesn't have to run stuff through committees. So we're in the middle of the game, and someone launches a high arcing shot. This is played with, as I recall, an actual soccer ball. But there were lacrosse goals, and there were all kinds of rules. And as this ball is sailing through the air, almost the entire length of the Utah soccer pitch, Ron announces, if that goes in the goal, it's worth 3 points. And you see, it's ordinarily in Utah soccer, you can only score 1 point at a time. But I thought it was really impressive. I can't remember whether it did go in the goal or not. But I thought that's the ultimate power, right? That's the kind of power that, for example, Donald Trump wishes he had. That just in the middle of something, you can suddenly announce a whole different outcome. I thought that was very impressive. All right, so I'm going to be honest with you. We are experiencing a little bit of a problem with our Ronco phone system. Ron Popeil assured us that we wouldn't have this problem, and he threw in a number of other Ronco products as well. But we occasionally do. And let's talk to Helen. Let me find Helen. This might be Helen. I'm confident that it's Helen. Yes, it is Helen. Helen, driving to Connecticut from Rhode Island. You're on the air.
Yeah, I live in Westerly. It's right on the border.
I know where Westerly is, sure.
Yeah. I don't hear many people speak about healthcare in the state it's in. And I worked for like 30, almost 40 years as a respiratory therapist. I'm also a nurse. And I worked through COVID CCU, and I can't even put into words how devastating it is to see what's healthcare and the condition it's in. There's not enough people to care for the residents. It's expectations that are unrealistic. And I feel like it's put on the healthcare worker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go in, if you work in a nursing home and you work an 8-hour shift, there's about 12 hours of work that needs to be done. And if you're in it for the right reason and you care about taking care of residents, and it's heartbreaking because you can't get it done. And I feel like maybe Chris Murphy can speak to this.
Well, one thing he will want, when he gets here today, one of the things he will want to talk about is an initiative he has regarding private equity investments in hospitals. And I think you'll be relatively happy with the direction that conversation goes in. But first of all, I just want to say, in terms of working through COVID, thank you for your service is too weak a term, and hero is almost not. It's just everybody gets called a hero these days. But what folks like you did during that time, just putting your bodies on the line, putting your safety on the line to help other people. I mean, it's something we should not forget easily that you guys did that.
Well, I think we go into this because we're caregivers and we care for people, and we want the best, and we want to do the best. And it did. Everyone kind of pulled together, and we just knew things had to be done, and we did it. I was lucky. My kids I couldn't really see my granddaughter. I used to watch her on the porch and stuff. So I felt like I was in a good position to do it because, I could. I just feel like to do with these. Sorry.
You might be cutting out a little bit, but I do want to first. So I'm just going to let you go, but I do want to thank you for putting that stuff on the table. Look, healthcare in this country is not as good as it should be. It's very, very expensive, and it gets poorer results than less expensive systems. And we've told a lot of lies to ourselves over the years. I mean, I used to, work in commercial radio, and I was either preceded by or I followed. Wait a minute, that's the same thing. I started out my commercial radio career with the 2-hour show that came on right before Rush Limbaugh, and then I finished my career with the 3-hour show that came on right after Rush Limbaugh. But the result was I heard a lot more Rush Limbaugh probably than most of you did. And one of the things that he would come up with all the time, and he would say all the time, like a mantra, is he'd say, "We have the best medical care in the world," which is kind of true if you're really wealthy. and you need special things. But for the common ruck, the rest of us, it's not. It's not the best medical system in the world. And in terms of longevity, in terms of infant and maternal mortality, in terms of a lot of the metrics, we're not leading the world. And yet we are paying an awful lot of money for it. And we are going to have even more conversations about that than we've had so far. And anyway, it may come up also when Senator Murphy is here. All right, so I'm going to take Tony because I can see him on the Ronco screen. So here we go. We have Tony in I believe Noank. Hi, Tony.
Hey, Colin, how are you?
Good.
Great. So my particular beef was, and maybe it's not. Maybe I shouldn't be beefing about it, but so ESPN apparently did this deal with the NFL, and it always seems whenever ESPN gets involved with anything, and the NFL, I'm more into the football than any of the other sports as far on a regular basis. It seems like you end up losing access. You have to pay a lot more for it, or you have to join a bunch of other streaming services.
Yeah.
And is that what this is all about?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, obviously, ESPN. First of all, NFL football is the most popular form of entertainment in America, of any kind of entertainment. It's like not even close. There isn't anything else that's kind of close to NFL football, except maybe college football. But I mean, just compared to everything else that's done on television, nothing else comes close. So obviously everybody wants to have some NFL, which is why you do see NFL on not just ESPN, but on streaming channels. I mean, like true streaming channels like Apple Plus. I don't know if they have an NFL, but HBO, Apple Plus, Prime, they all want to get into this pro sports business. They all want to carry, if they can, NFL games, but also NBA and MLB games. And so the consumer... let me just say something. I'll tell you a little story about myself. So I have kind of a puritanical Yankee streak still left in me that I think my mother put there. And so at a certain point, I'm a Red Sox fan. And so a few years ago, it just worked out that Ness and we're cord cutters. We don't get Xfinity or Frontier or anything like that. There was no way to get Nesson. Nesson is the network that carries most of the Red Sox games. What you had to do is have a private subscription, an individual subscription to Nesson, which cost a lot more per month than like Apple Plus or Hulu or Disney Plus, it's really expensive. So I just wouldn't do it. I just said, I don't care. I'm not doing it. It's extortion, and I will not cooperate.
And that becomes the only way to watch them.
But I happen to live with a woman who's much more free spending and spontaneous, and she doesn't care about the Red Sox, but she cares that I'm unhappy. So she has bought Nesson, and so now I have Nesson. And I still feel extorted about it. Anyway, an even bigger Red Sox fan than I has just walked into the studio. His name is Chris Murphy. He's very, very upset about last night.
I can't be that upset about last night.
You're not that upset. No. I'd be 3 out of 4. That's pretty good.
I don't even know how I'd get Nesson now. I watch almost all my Red Sox games on YouTube. Like I wait until the game's over.
You're a U.S. senator.
I know.
Look, Obama got Game of Thrones before the rest of us.
Oh.
They would give Obama Game of Thrones when he needed to watch it.
I don't think I can get the Red Sox games before everybody else.
You shouldn't investigate that. AI can do almost anything. But yeah, no, I get Nesson now, but not because I live with somebody who is much more free spending than I am. Anyway, welcome, U.S. Senator Chris Murphy.
Great to see you, Colin.
Let's talk for a few minutes. We'll go to a break, and then we'll kind of figure out our overall game plan. But somebody did just call up about healthcare, and I know the whole question of private equity buying hospitals has been, first of all, kind of a sore subject here in Connecticut with Prospect, and that you have kind of taken this on as a cause. Say a little bit about it and what you think needs to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago when almost every healthcare experience we had was with a not-for-profit entity. We now accept today that all of our insurance companies, for instance, are in it to make enormous, disgusting amounts of profit, and we're just pawns in that game. But, when I came into this world, insurance companies were by and large not-for-profit. We thought that there shouldn't be a profit motive in the distribution of life-saving healthcare. Today, that's been flipped on its head. Almost everything in our healthcare system is just a means for people to get very, very rich and very, very wealthy. Private equity is the worst of that transition because private equity is not intending to hold an asset like a hospital for more than a handful of years. And so what they do is they strip it bare, they borrow a ton of money, and then they sort of flip the asset. Often it's in much worse shape than when they found it. So yes, it may be too late to say that we're going to go back to the day when all our insurance companies were not for profit. But at the very least, I think it's time for us to draw some hard lines when it comes to these private equity companies owning the most important healthcare assets in our communities, our acute care hospitals. So Connecticut's kind of at a decision point. Are we going to allow another private equity company to come in and buy these 3 hospitals? Or are we just going to say from here on out, we are only interested in not-for-profit ownership of our hospitals? That's the decision I think Connecticut should make, and I'm certainly exploring conversations with colleagues in Washington as to whether we should try to make that decision nationwide.
I mean, we should say that, and I read your report. I mean, some of the things that were reported there were really kind of shocking conditions that you would have, you would have expected in, I don't know, Romania under Ceausescu or something, like rusty stretchers and like IVs that don't work and stuff like that. These are hospitals that are often not adequately stocked or staffed. And on the other hand, another way to think about this, and I'm not even sure how I feel about it, is just regulate everybody. Because these days, Connecticut, if you look at hospital ownership in Connecticut, it's basically Northwell, Yale, New Haven, and Hartford Healthcare. They have most of what's out there. Those are all nonprofits. One could argue, and by the way, most of them generously support public broadcasting. So please don't interpret this as a criticism. But most of them run kind of like profit-seeking organizations. They're patient hunting. They have internal referral services, and there are disincentives to refer outside for their own doctors to refer a patient somewhere else. And I mean, one thing you could talk about doing is just regulating everybody. I'm assuming with the private equity people, you just think there's no way to stay ahead of them. They'll just.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to regulate the day-to-day operations of these institutions. And so I do think that there is just something fundamentally different, no matter what you think of Yale or Hartford Healthcare, in terms of how they approach care versus, how some of these rapacious private equity companies approach care. You are exactly right that the size and scope of these not-for-profits and their behavior often mirrors for-profit operation, but they are still ultimately beholden to communities. They have community-led boards, and they are going to hold on to these hospitals for the long run, and so they're interested in preserving the institution's credibility and the institution's relationship with the community in the long run. Private equity companies know that they're going to only own the hospital for 3 or 4 years, and so they really don't care about burning bridges with the community. So to me, yes, you could have a tighter day-to-day regulation of these institutions, but I just don't think that there's any world in which we have to accept that these kind of short-term ownership investment firms should have their hands on the most important healthcare assets that we have in Connecticut.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. If I keel over here right now, my producers are instructed to, first of all, take your car and drive me down to Yale, New Haven.
I don't have any like special lights or.
We don't care.
Yeah.
We just want something fast. They may have a plan to leave me in the parking lot to die, but my plan is to get down to Yale, New Haven. And obviously, if you have a choice between one of the big nonprofits and PE, you're going to take the nonprofit every freaking time.
Well, and the data just tells us that you are going to get better health care from a not-for-profit facility. We know, for instance, that when a private equity company comes in and takes over a nursing home, mortality rates in that nursing home spike by 10% almost overnight. And so the data is absolutely clear that when a private for-profit company comes in and owns and takes over a clinic, a nursing home, or a hospital, outcomes get worse.
All right, we're talking to Chris Murphy. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back, and we're going to see what else there is to talk about. Quite a bit, it turns out.
Ready as a fireman,
So here in studio with me is the very unattractive, both inside and out, senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy. Actually, I don't feel that way about you. I think you're very attractive. But the president
and out. I just wanted to make it
inside and
100% clear.
Yeah. So, but the president did truth that or X that about you, or what's that like to have the president of the United States attack you at that level?
You know, in his first term, he threatened to refer me for criminal prosecution because I had apparently violated something called the Logan Act by going out and meeting with foreign countries without his permission. So, this kind of pales in comparison, just being, criticized for being not as attractive as the president believes he is.
Well, he also said this, he's talking about what you said about Putin. He said, this war can be ended now, but stupid people like Chris Murphy, John Bolton, and others make it much harder to do so. Well, you saw what happened to John Bolton.
Right. Maybe I should start locking my doors a little bit more securely. Yeah, I mean, listen, the president is playing a super weak hand with Putin right now. I don't deny that there is going to be a diplomatic end to this war. It is not likely that either Russia or Ukraine is going to prevail militarily. But Donald Trump has basically told Putin there's no reason to sit at the negotiating table because I'm not going to continue to support Ukraine militarily. And so long as Putin knows that ultimately Ukraine's weapons are going to run out, he knows that he has a shot at military victory, or at the very least, strengthening his hand at the negotiating table by taking significant amounts of territory over the course of the rest of this year. So I am certainly open to a diplomatic solution in Ukraine. It's just not going to happen when the president is essentially playing a patsy to Putin.
I mean, the whole thing has been such an odd spectacle, too. I mean, he shows up in Alaska having, first of all, said that he was going to Russia a couple of times. He was getting his directions from Sarah Palin or something, but and then seemed unprepared. I mean, he seemed not prepared to broker any kind of agreement or to really work with Putin on anything. It just seemed like whatever plan he had flown out of his mind. And then the subsequent meeting with Zelensky, we now have the leaders of Europe having to chaperone Zelensky. So he
to make sure it's not
on.
Another international incident. Yeah, I mean, the president said, I want a ceasefire, and if I don't get a ceasefire, then I'm going to impose sanctions. He didn't even have a discussion about a ceasefire, as we now learn, and he immediately made clear that, in fact, he was not thinking about either sanctions or additional military support to Ukraine, which is to Putin a pass to continue the war and to continue to not be serious about negotiations.
Yeah, no, he just wanted a sweet hang. All right, we're going to talk to a few people who've called in here, 888-720-9677, 888-720-WNPR. We have Rhonda from Bloomfield up first. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, I have a question for the senator. I am a progressive Democrat from Bloomfield, and I protest frequently in public. Because of your leadership, Senator, in calling out Trump's abuses of power, people like me look to you for guidance on how to be more effective in resisting the growing fascism. And in light of recent events in Los Angeles and D.C., we're frightened that Trump is going to bring armed National Guard troops to Hartford and other Connecticut cities to intimidate and unlawfully detain our immigrant neighbors. My question is this: is this the moment that we've been looking for, the signal that it's time to escalate peaceful protests to nonviolent civil disobedience?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for what you've done to protect American democracy. The most important thing we can do is show up. Physical presence is what matters right now. And if we survey history as to how to best protect a democracy from a would-be despot, it's all about courage. We haven't seen enough of it in this country. Frankly, the people of the country are showing courage. You're showing up to protests, and many others are. But we haven't seen courage in the business community. By and large, we have not seen it from the legal profession nor from higher education. We're going to need institutions in this country to stand up and to start saying no to Donald Trump. And the way that they are going to find that courage is through your actions. Yes, I think there will likely be a moment where we're going to have to engage in more difficult forms of protest, whether that be civil disobedience or general strikes. I think we'll know the moment as a nation. We're going to have a decision to make in Congress this September, though. The funding for the budget comes due in September. we're going to have to decide as a Congress whether we're going to continue to fund this creeping totalitarianism. I don't think it's enough for Republicans to just promise us that they're going to hold the president accountable to spend the money as we write in the budget. I have been the only Democrat thus far that has been unwilling to vote for these appropriations bills in committee, and I'm doing so because I think it's time for Democrats in Congress to start fighting harder, to draw firmer lines. I think if we do that, we will provide some of the impetus for courage out in the private sector that so far we've been lacking.
But, I mean, the other place that is really lacking, I'm saying something very obvious right now, are among Republican members of Congress. And what's happened is, our Constitution has division of powers, but it's really set up for Congress to be the most important part of it. Congress is kind of first among equals, ordinarily in this. And by kind of abdicating everything to President Trump, Congress is becoming less and less relevant all the time. If it's not able to respond meaningfully, if it's just your party, you just wonder how well Congress can function if Republicans don't join with you.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any sign that they will. I mean, they effectively operate as employees of Donald Trump. There's really no signal that they're going to break in any meaningful way. And so I think all of our focus right now has to be on keeping the democracy healthy enough so that we can change who runs Congress next November. And obviously, that's on a knife edge right now. There are some who say that Democrats shouldn't fight fire with fire, that just because Texas is going to redistrict in the middle of a 10-year cycle, Democrats shouldn't stoop to their level. I think we absolutely have to do that. We are going to have to use every tool in our tool belt to try to make sure that the will of the voters next November actually finds its way into a change in who runs either the House and the Senate or both.
For you, and not just for you, but really the entire party in Washington, it's kind of an interesting dilemma because in a way, what you've been told post 2024 election is you've got to talk more directly to people about their needs. You've got to talk to people about, okay, housing, healthcare, taxes makes up more than 51% of your income. We got to do something about that. Here's what we're going to do. And maybe here's what we're going to do is you won't have to go to crappy hospitals anymore because we're going to get PE out of there. But there's also this other thing happening. And another part of what you're being told is don't just crap on Trump all the time. We get it. You have to do some other stuff for us. Except that you get off a train at Union Station in D.C. and it looks like you're in a country where just, the armed forces are there. It looks like you're in a military dictatorship. And that's not something you can really turn a blind eye to. But you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. People really want to hear a message. Trump's getting more and more unpopular. And the question is, how can the Democrats capture some of that popularity that he's losing?
Yeah, or it's the same story in that his agenda is so unpopular, right? Throwing 17 million people off their health care in order to pass along tax cuts for billionaires, that the only way he could get away with it is to destroy democracy, destroy the ability of people to dissent, try to rig the elections next November so that even if he's at 32% approval, he still has his party reelected. So to me, it's the same story. Trump is trying to destroy our democracy and the rule of law so that he can essentially get away with mass-scale corruption using the White House to enrich himself and turning all of government into just a means of enrichment for his billionaire Mar-a-Lago crowd. So I get it that sometimes those two sort of conversations, what Trump is doing to make your life on a day-to-day basis harder and his attacks on democracy look different, but I actually think they're part of the same story.
Yeah, and in a way, too, it proves that we've been using the wrong metaphor for decades and decades now. That metaphor about the frog or the lobster in the pot, and you're turning up the temperature at 1 degree every day or whatever. I mean, it turns out, though, you can turn up the temperature 50 degrees and people are paralyzed. I mean, having ICE agents raid a car wash in Newington, having armed troops in the nation's capital, getting ready to go to Chicago next probably or something. This is all shock. This isn't 1 degree of temperature up every 5 hours or something. This is all kind of shock therapy, and it doesn't seem like we are able to organize a very good response.
Yeah, and I think that there is, this narrative out there that there is going to be this day when the moment of true crisis for democracy comes. But, there is not going to be an attempt to burn down the Capitol. There is probably not going to be a day where he declares national martial law. But what can happen over time is that slowly but surely, fewer people just decide to come out of their house to engage in protests. Fewer people write donations to Democratic candidates. More and more colleges refuse to allow protests to happen. And we will still have an election next November, but it won't actually be a true, free, and fair election. And so that's why I'm trying to convince my colleagues to stand up sort of more robust resistance, to be willing to engage in riskier tactics right now, because I think we have to, use our power and our bully pulpit to signal to the country that we might actually be right at the exact moment when we lose our democracy, even though you may not know it until next November.
I'm going to grab one more call, and we'll take a break, and then we'll come back. This is going to be, I'm taking him first because he during a low period of it in his life, he roomed with me for a little while. But hi, Fred. It's Fred in Collinsville. You have the floor.
Hello, Colin, and hello, Senator. It won't take but a moment. Senator, I'd like to know what percentage of the Republicans in the Senate really know that Trump is very bad for our democracy, even though they're afraid to say so publicly?
I mean, very, very few. I mean, you're talking about, a number that I can probably count on 1 or 1.5 hands. I think what you need to understand is that something has happened inside the Republican Party over the last 10 years. 2 different ideas have become dominant. One idea is the idea that democracy is kind of outdated, that it's really, not able to keep up with modern times, that a country that's as nimble as China is ultimately going to be able to outflank us if we have to go through the inefficiency of coming to consensus around our decisions. So the Republican Party has just kind of given up on democracy with a small d. But the second thing that's happened is that they really do believe that multiculturalism and progressivism writ large is a sort of existential threat to the country, and that the only way to preserve what they believe to be the definition of America, which is kind of a white Christian version of America, is to just eradicate Democrats from the body politic. And that's kind of and that kind of allows them to justify any means necessary, locking us up, making us non-competitive in elections. So, no, there are a handful of Republicans in the Senate who know what Donald Trump is doing is wrong. Most of those who come to that conclusion eventually just give up and retire. But 90% of Republicans in Congress, to some extent, believe those 2 things, that democracy is probably not worth fighting for any longer, and that the only way to save America is to just purge Democrats and progressives from the political ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see what conservatism was like in this country, prior to the sea change that you just described, I think pretty accurately, read the Wall Street Journal editorial page. They still believe all that stuff that conservative. So they go nuts. What you raided John Bolton's home? What? 10% of Intel? That's private enterprise. Government, the conservatives used to not want government to meddle at all in private enterprise. Never mind, like grabbing 10% of something. So it's fun to read the Wall Street Journal editorial page. It's kind of a nostalgia trip, to sort of, Reagan era conservatism.
Yeah, but of course Trump has done a deal with the Wall Street Journal crowd in which he has promised them that if you look the other way on my destruction of democratic norms, and even my destruction of the rule of law, which in normal times would undergird a free market economy, I'll just take care of you. I'll butter your bread. And this is, again, the unfortunately tried and true story of how democracies do get converted into something that at the very least is a very illiberal democracy. The would-be dictator does a deal with the economic elites in which he destroys the rule of law, but he protects the riches of a handful of people who guide public opinion and run the economy.
All right, we're going to grab a really quick break here. We'll come back and we'll finish things up with Chris Murphy. And I got to say some quick thank yous. First to the maestro, Dylan Reyes, our technical producer. Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions has produced this show with, I think, Robin Doyen-Aiken on phones. Joe Koss is operating our YouTube feed. And we're here with U.S. Senator Christopher Murphy. Chris Murphy, we're going to take at least one more call. This is going to be from Mike in Woodbury. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Colin, and hi, Senator. I really appreciate you constantly ringing the 5-alarm fire bell about this situation, which a lot of other Democrats are not doing. But my question is, even though, as you say, Donald Trump's approval ratings are falling, people hate the big, beautiful bill, but they seem to hate Democrats more. I mean, the Democratic Party is like a 33% approval, 63% unapproval. How do we turn that around in less than a year? For the next, for the midterms. I mean, it just sounds like it's a real uphill climb to make people say, "Yeah, okay, I can go with the Democrats."
Yeah, I mean, that's a show in and of itself. But here's my stab at it. I mean, obviously, the Democratic Party is super unpopular now, in part because there are a lot of Democrats out there who just don't think we're fighting hard enough. So if we changed our tactics and fought a little bit harder and really stood for something, for instance, this fall, when the government funding bill comes up, I think we would recapture some of those folks. But I'll give you another sort of path forward that I sort of believe deeply in my heart is necessary for Democrats to win. We were right to run the election in 2024 on democracy, but, people sort of looked at this version of democracy and thought to themselves, this version doesn't seem worth saving. And by Democrats sort of reflexively defending the democracy we have now, we looked kind of like overly Pollyannish institutionalists. When I started out in politics, the Democratic Party stood very firmly and strongly for getting dark money and private money out of politics. That was like a top 3 issue for Democrats. Today, when Democrats talk about democracy reform, we generally are talking about voting rights, which is really important, but it's not a broadcast message as much as getting private money, anonymous money, corporate money out of politics. So I think the Democratic Party is kind of needs to get back to where it was in the 1990s, when one of our top 2 issues is the reform of democracy, is making democracy work for regular people again, which is campaign finance reform, lobbying reform, banning members of Congress from trading stocks. I think if we focused all of our energy on unrigging the economy and on unrigging our democracy, we would have a chance to pick up, some fraying parts of Trump's coalition who are coming to the conclusion that this guy actually isn't sincere about cleaning up the swamp, and he's making my life much harder economically in order to enrich his cabal of Mar-a-Lago friends. So that's my recommendation for the Democratic Party. Talk about voting rights, that's important, but really structure our democracy reform message around money in politics.
I wonder if also, every electoral cycle now seems like it's a change cycle. We're just in a permanent turnover of change cycles. People are unhappy. People, you've really delved a lot into kind of the mental health of Americans. People seem very unhappy. They seem dissatisfied with what they have right now and what they had in the past. I wonder if part of the messaging has to be, Trump's messaging was, I'm going to tear stuff down. I'm going to drain the swamp. And that resonated with a certain group of voters. And I wonder if talking about the past is a good idea. Maybe talking about the future, talking about we're going to have to build new things that have never existed before because, in fact, of your disenchantment with everything that you had before.
No, and listen, I think it is important for us to be engaged in, what I would call a spiritual conversation with the country. People today are feeling more unhappy, more disconnected, devoid of purpose and meaning in a way that's unfamiliar to folks. And, Trump's movement is a movement of community. He gives you a narrative to grab hold of, that what's happening to you is a result of immigrants or a result of outsourcing to China. So I think it's okay for Democrats to be engaged in just a much more responsible conversation with Americans about how we put purpose and meaning back into their lives. But I think you're also critiquing what has been a Democratic Party addiction to incrementalism, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of tweaking the market a little bit as a means to try to deliver purpose and meaning back to your life. To me, the example here would be how we talk about prescription drugs. Our big idea was changing the way that Medicare negotiates using bulk purchasing power with the existing prescription
Which
drug.
is not nothing, by the way, but I know where you're going.
Which is
Yeah.
not nothing, but why don't you just cap every prescription drug cost in the price in the country? Why don't you just stop drug companies from advertising on TV and radio? Why don't you limit the amount of profits that any one company can make off of a particular drug? I just think we have to have big, bolder ideas. And that's part of the reason why this Mamdani guy is doing so well in New York, is because he's talking about really simple ideas: rent control, free transportation, a healthy grocery store in every neighborhood. Whether every single one of those ideas is practically possible in the next year, he's at least sort of giving you a vision of a better life, of a more affordable life for New Yorkers. And he's not just relying on market tweaks in a way that Democrats have reflexively for far too long.
And I'm 100% with you, what you just said about prescription drugs. And it's insane. I mean, we have people do medical tourism. They go to Brazil to get their insulin. I mean, it's just crazy. But I think you only got about 60 seconds. But part of the answer to your question is the thing you said a few seconds ago: money. And one of the reasons there's not meaningful opposition to prescription prices here is because there's a lot of money in the game to make it come out the other way.
And a lot of it is anonymous money, right? A lot of it is money that's coming from the big drug companies, the big insurance companies, that's being fed into political party committees or super PACs without anybody knowing. So, for me, we need to be for something big and bold to get money out of politics. That's probably a constitutional amendment. We probably have to be for a constitutional amendment to allow Congress to directly regulate out of our politics and out of our elections corporate money, PAC money, and anonymous money. Whether or not that's possible or not, I don't know, but at least it would signal to people that we understand the gravity of the corruption that exists in our politics today.
Yeah, I think there was a time when you could just try to be virtuous. You could say, okay, I'm not going to take any of that money. That doesn't seem to resonate with people anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take PAC money, but there's nothing that I can do to stop one of these big super PACs from coming into one of my races and spending money. It takes a constitutional amendment likely to stop that from happening.
Well, Chris Murphy, thanks for your time. Thanks for fighting the fight.
Appreciate it, man.
Go Red Sox.
All right.
And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, man.
Difference